Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in detail. World Trigger, chapter number 255 and chapter 256. These chapters are titled The Away Mission Test Part number 46 and The Away Mission Test Part number 47. And these are our World Trigger chapters for July of 2025. And for the very first time in a long time, I'm talking about World Trigger chapters the month that they came out. Now, of course, we're a few weeks off from the release of these chapters, being that I'm talking about these chapters at the very tail end of July, but they still came out earlier this month. It has not been a full 30 or 31 days, however long a month is actually supposed to be, since these chapters came out, which is actually, like, very awesome just to see, like, hey, I'm almost finally caught up. And I guess now is a good point as any to talk about it. At this point, it's not confirmed whether or not we have World Trigger chapters for August of 2025, but for the main fact that we have had World Trigger chapters since March of this year. What is that, like March, April, May, June, July? Yeah, we've had 5 straight months with World Trigger, and I mean, we have 2 chapters this month, we had 2 chapters last month in July, and 2 chapters in April. Like, we've gotten so much World Trigger already this year, and of course, as we'll be getting to by the end of these chapters, it really seems like the away mission test or the sealed environment phase is truly and completely over, and the next set of chapters that we could be getting is probably going to be, at least the very end of it, is where the second part of the combat phase of the exam will begin. Now, I say that for the main fact of, like, we all know how World Trigger works. Like, we could have an entire chapter that for some reason goes and focuses on, like, Galapola or what they're doing during this time next chapter, which would just be, like, really awesome if we did have that. But just knowing how World Trigger works, even though we get the entire breakdown and really all of the various rules and end off this chapter really on the final ideas of, like, the end of the night, we also get ideas in this chapter of, like, oh, you've got your trigger loadouts, you can change them and all of that various stuff. And I could easily see chapter number 257 being a chapter really focusing on those aspects before we get into the combat phase itself. But with all of that out of the way, we have 2 chapters to talk about today, and they are really dense chapters, all things considered, and I think I'm going to have a good amount to say about both of them, so I just say let's go ahead and get started talking about World Trigger chapter number 255, but actually not yet. First, I just want to sort of mention what happened last time, and really, we ended off last chapter World Trigger with all the captain's evaluations being done. We went through and saw all 10 of the squads except for Suwa Squad 7, and we ended off last chapter with Suwa pretty much being like, alright boys, let's get this captain's eval done. And that is where we ended off last chapter, and would you believe it? That is where we start this chapter of World Trigger. Chapter number 255, titled The Away Mission Test, Part 46. Now, we start off this chapter with Osamu sitting down and pretty much looking at the clock. We see it is currently 5:58 p.m. And Osamu's thinking, like, oh my gosh, like, the final phase of this test ends in 1 hour. It's like, I really thought we might be given a chance for, like, some last-minute upset or a special assignment or something like that, but it's really not looking like they're going to hand us any miracles out. And it's like, hey, clearly I, as a person, am capable of shifting the tide of war in a fair and square fight. And Osamu just thinks, like, hey, it is a hard truth, but I better keep that in mind. And, oh, this is just such a weird thing that we get here. It's like, oh, yeah, Osamu's just being reminded of how, like, the world works here all of a sudden. And even though, like, he's a person who's been praised for having all this ability to, like, sit down and come up with all these weird and wacky tactics, at the end of the day, he's still just one measly person. And can one measly person really affect the outcome of a war? And this is a very interesting thing that Osamu thinks about at the beginning of this chapter. But as he's pretty much going through all of this, Suwa then just says, like, alright gang, let's go ahead and get this captain's eval done nice and quick. And he's like, alright, here's the deal, I'm planning on giving all 500 points to Mikumo. End of story, that's what we're doing. And of course, Osamu is like, what? Like, wait a second, you're giving all the points to me? And Kotori's like, no, you're not. Like, what the hell? Like, what about the rest of us, right? And like, hey, Suwa, like, does Osamu have, like, blackmail on you? Like, why are you giving him all of those points? And I love how Suwa's like, no, it doesn't have any blackmail on me, but just, like, think about it. He's like, Oki, can you remind us what the test we're currently taking is? And Oki says, like, I mean, it's the away mission selection exam. And Suwa's like, yes, exactly. Away mission selection. we're here to find out which of us in Squad 7 can join the next away mission, and like that's kind of the whole point, right? And really, out of the 5 of us sitting here, Osamu is the only one who is seriously gunning for that mission, and frankly, I wouldn't be shocked if he does get chosen given his performance so far. So it also makes sense for all of the bonus points to simply go to him. And Kotori, who's of course like the biggest naysayer in Osamu getting all of these points, is like, yeah, I mean, I get that Four Eyes was handy to have around during the battle sim, but like in real life combat, he's barely a cut above Cannon Father. The fact is, we don't know what it takes to really be chosen for this mission yet. And Suwa says like, yeah, Kotori, you have the whole idea correct, but that is why I want to give him a better shot. With these 500 points, it could easily make up for any mistakes he may make during the combat phase. He's like, hey, and also Kotori, don't you have a deal with like Osamu about Torimaru or Kyosuke? Like, you want to make sure that Mikumo ends up passing this so you get your end out of that deal. Of course, Kotori was going to be able to go on a date with Torimaru, right? And I really love how Kotori's like, those are separate issues, like apples and oranges. Like, either way, Oki, Ui, like, are you guys really okay with this? Like, it really could ruin your chance for the big pay bonus for passing this test, right? And I really like how Oki's like, I mean, I don't have a problem with it, like, no skin off my back. I mean, I didn't come into this exam expecting bonus pay, and I really wasn't wanting to join the away mission test either. And Ui has a little bit of a different take than Oki does here. She's like, hey, I mean, it's the captain's evaluation, and Suwa's the captain, so I respect what his decision is, right? And of course, to this, Kotori's like, and you, Osamu? Like, do you think this is all fine and dandy? And Osamu's like, I mean, I do not think it's all fine and dandy, but to be honest, I do want all of these points. And Suwa's like, alright then, it's settled, like, 500 points for Makumo. But Kotori's like, no, I'm not saying I'm done with all of this. And she just starts to, like, throw a little bit of a tantrum here in the room. And Suwa's like, okay then. We'll give Osamu 400 points, and we'll let you decide, Kotori, what to do with the other 100. And she's like, okay, sounds good. That's all I wanted to hear. And I love how Oki and Ui are like, really, Kotori? Like, you had to make such a big fuss over that? As we see that Kotori just, like, grabs out a little bit of a notepad and writes down who or how she wants these 100 points distributed. And we see that she goes over, folds the paper, and hands it over to Suwa, as we just see written on the paper is 20 points for Suwa, 15 points for both Oki and Ui, and 50 points to Four Eyes, giving no points to herself, as of course she's still giving the bulk to Osamu like he really deserves here in a moment, but she just wanted to spread around the love a little bit more. As Suwa just sees these, and she doesn't really tell any of the other squad, like, or Suwa doesn't tell any of the other squad how Kotori distributed these points. Is like, damn, like, this girl, I swear, she never makes it easy. As we end off Suwa Squad 7's Captain Evals with the whole idea, Suwa has 20 points, Ui and Oki both have 15, Osamu has 450, and Kotori has 0. As Suwa's just like, alright then team, we're in the final stretch, we have one more hour to do all of this stuff, so, I mean, let's just try to rack up as many points in the next hour, pretty much. And the entire team does one of the, okay, yep, sounds good. Pretty much everybody has their own unique response there, right? But as all of this goes on, we just skip time forward an hour, as we just see the clock reads 6:59 p.m. 6:59 p.m. It continues reading that on until all of a sudden pops up 7 p.m. and we see on everybody's computer a little banner populate that just says like, hey, assignment over, final rankings will appear here at 7:10 p.m. And we see that all of Suwa Squad 7 is like, oh, well, that's like actually it. As we just start saying like, hey, the sealed environment, final day, labor hours are over. And Dewey's like, alright, and that is a wrap. And I love how Kotori's like trying to mess up, you're like, damn it, like the computer's like, I can't even do anything on this thing anymore, right? But Oki just is like, man, like today really went by in a flash, like this was really interesting, like it kind of feels like we didn't actually sit down and do as much as we really could have, right? And Kyora's like, hey, speak for yourself, I feel like I did absolutely plenty. But as all of them were bickering, Suwa eventually just says like, alright team, we have a few minutes before the rankings go up, so let me just like quickly say, you all kick serious butt over these past 7 days. It's like, hey, it's thanks to all of your efforts, I'm probably looking better than ever in the eyes of the management right now, and no matter what the final results look like, I am the one responsible here as the captain, so if we do come out near the top, you all have to be very grateful for me, right? And Oki's like, come on, Suwa, like, we're already plenty grateful. And I love Kotori being like, boo, you suck, and Suwa's just, like, sitting there laughing like, ha 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 ha. Pretty much being like, I'm the cool one. If we win, all the glory goes to me, pretty much, right? But as all this happens, we see all of the phones in the room are reading off 7:09 p.m. And of course, the rankings are almost here. They're 1 minute away. And as all this happens, we really get the up-close faces of Osamu, Kodera, and Mizukami. As we just, like, get a big focus on them being like, yes, Mizukami and Kodera squads are, like, number 1 and number 3 currently, and of course Suwa squad is in that number 2 spot. As the time finally hits, 7:10 arrives, and we get the sealed environment phase final results. And I haven't done this in a while, but I guess we're just going to go through and read off all of the names and numbers. As we see, first place, by no surprise, is Mizukami's Squad 9, with 13,418 points at the end of the day. And we see second place is no longer Suwa Squad, but Kodera Squad 6 with 13,378 points, a mere 40 points away from Mizukami Squad. Well, about 800 points under that is Suwa Squad 7 with 12,537 points. Fourth place is Murakami Squad 10 with 11,887 points. Wakamura Squad 11 got 5th place here. Kitazoe Squad 4, Utagawa Squad 1, Ninamiya Squad 8, Kuruma Squad 5, Kakizaki Squad 3, and Oji Squad 2 rounds out 11th place. As we see that the runner-up the very bottom, I should say, OG Squad 2 ended up getting 10,676 points. And yeah, we see that OG Squad is, what is that, like, a little under 2,800 points away from first place here, which really does make sense. I mean, OG Squad is not one that we really ever got too much focus on in this part of the manga. I mean, they have some characters like, yes, Ikoma's on that squad, but like, OG Squad, Kakizaki Squad, Kuruma Squad, like, you read those names, you're like, yeah, those guys aren't really important whatsoever. I mean, Mizukami was really important during this exam, Kodera was, of course, Suwa Squad is, like, our main POV squad we've been focusing. Murakami Squad, I think, really just did well being of the fact that it is made up of a lot of people who have really high potentials for Border's future, so I do get why they got 4th at the end of the day. Wakamura Squad has Hyusei. Kitazoe has Hana, who is part of Kotori Squad, so it was the whole plot point earlier and the whole idea. And then Utagawa and Ninamiya's in 7th and 8th place. It has Yuma and Chika, people who need to go on this mission, right? But either way, we just see all of the characters now, like, reacting to these final results. It's just someone's like, wow, like, I can't believe it. We actually took 3rd place. And everybody's like, whoa, like, 3rd place, like, this is awesome. Except for Kotori, who's like, damn it, Kodera, like, you stole 2nd from out from under us, right? But Ui just says, like, I mean, yeah, it's crazy. They staged a comeback of over 1,200 points since yesterday. And, like, whatever their secret strategy was, it sure worked like a charm. And someone's like, yeah, well, like, 1,200 points. And he just thinks in his mind, like, really, nothing I might have done today could have possibly matched what they did. Of course, going back to the beginning of the chapter, like, me as one lone person, I can't really do much, right? But either way, Sue says, like, all right then, well, from last place losers to finishing 3rd, you all should be really proud, right? It's like, hey, we did a really good job. A job well done. And so I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good point. And she was like, well, we may be a little bummed for dropping to 3rd, but not as bummed as he must be about all of this. And of course, we now cut to Kodera Squad 6. Who else would Suwa be thinking about than Kodera, right? As we see the in Kodera Squad, we have good old Okudera, and he's like, oh my gosh, like a measly 40-point difference, right? Mirror says, like, yeah, I mean, this battle was definitely a close one. And Operator Rakuda just is like, hey, but like, 2nd place is still really impressive, Kodera, right? But Kodera just is like, well, I mean, The thing is, yesterday I realized that it might turn out this way, and once Wakamura's squad claimed that massive point boost all at once, I wondered if the other squads might also try something, realizing they could save up their assignments to submit them after the fact, right? As we remember back to a few chapters ago, whenever Kon brought this up to Mizukami's squad, being like, hey, is this what you're planning to do, Mizukami? And Mizukami is like, yes, it is what I'm planning to do, right? As we just see that, what is his name? Kodera just continues being like, hey, and yet in wake of all of that hardship that the four of you had already put in, I couldn't bring myself to ask you guys to work even more. Like, hey, we failed to claim first place by 40 points because of my naive judgment and because I wouldn't put myself on the line. And for that, I apologize. And of course, Okudera's like, hey, don't be so hard on yourself, Kodera. Like, it's not that big of an issue, right? But of course, the other A-ranker in the room, Kitora, has something a bit more interesting to say. She's like, hey, that actually may be a little true. As we just see everybody in the room just go silent, as Kitora just says like, hey, even if you were reluctant to speak up, you could have made me the middle manager, and I would have gladly enforced the brutal overtime schedule. She's like, hey, on that note, Kodera, I would please ask you to make better use of us during the next phase of the exam. And Kodera's like, okay, I will, and thank you guys. And yeah, that's where we end off with Kodera Squad 6 for this little bit of the exam, on this note of like, hey, Kodera still has a little bit more learning to do when it comes to being a captain. But either way, we now cut over to Mizukami's Squad 9, who claimed first place, and of course, we start off by Kashio going, wow, first place by 40 points, right? And he's like, wow, like that really the decision to work overtime last night really actually like clinched it in for us and got us to win, right? And Mizukami's like, hey, it's really thanks to your all hard work. I mean, we worked till 1 in the morning, but sort of is what it is there, right? As we see, Kon looks over at Toroya, who really is just like pouting, not really looking pleased with how this outcome was. And she's like, hey, like, Toroya, like, you don't seem particularly pleased, do you? And Toroya's like, I mean, I'm not particularly, like, I'm proud enough about giving my best effort on this test, but somehow it really doesn't feel like I've earned first place. And but either way, she's like, whatever, I'm fired up for phase 2. I'll put my weight for the squad then and put some even more on top of it, right? Like, yay, Toroya's fired up. Oh man, the character I care so much about, Toroya. Woohoo, right? But either way, we just see that Kon's like, wow, like, you've really been pulling in plenty, but either way, we'll be counting on you in the next phase, right? Arafune says, like, hey, and also, like, somehow we managed to maintain the top spot since day 1, which amounts to nothing less than absolute victory as I see it, right? But Arafune's like, hey, and with you being the captain, like, I'd say you're very cut out to be a leader, Murakami. And Murakami's like, I mean, I really don't know about all of it. Like, hey, as the days went on, it felt like being in charge suited me less and less. And he's like, hey, Arafune, like, perhaps for the combat phase, like, would you mind taking over as leader, right? And Arafune's like, I mean, sure, but only if you get shot down in battle, and I'll take over for you, right? But of course, this is happening in the 5 minutes between, 7:10 and 7:15, and of course, as we all know, at 7:15 there's supposed to be another announcement, and as we see that Mizukami and Arafune are bantering back and forth, we see this 5 minute sort of wraps up, and at 7:15 there is a voice that comes over the loudspeaker cameras in the room once more. And as all this happens, we just hear a voice say, hello everybody, this is the Selection Test Management speaking. Stand by for an overview of the rules for Phase 2. And that's where we end this chapter of World Trigger chapter number 255. This is really a chapter mainly focused on, okay, the exam is over, and this is how the top 3 teams react to this information, pretty much. Honestly, there's not a whole lot to break down here. I really think the most interesting thing is not only the page where we see all of these results being plastered, but also Osamu's whole thing of, like, I as one person cannot, like, change the tide of this war. But really, the big interesting stuff that we're all waiting for is about to come here in chapter number 256, so let's just go ahead and get into it, right? As we, of course, we start off this chapter number 256, the away mission test part 47, with that same voice coming over the loudspeaker saying, alright guys, stand by for an overview of the rules for Phase 2. And Oki is being the godsend character he is here. She's just like, oh man, that sounds like Director Shinoda all of a sudden, right? I really love how this has happened, like, twice now whenever these loudspeaker voices come over. Oki's always like, oh man, that sounds like Usami. oh man, that sounds like Director Shinoda. Like, man, Oki must have a good knack for voices or something like that, right? But either way, Osama's like, yeah, it sure does sound like him. As we see Shinoda over the loudspeaker says, alright, this announcement will be heard by both A-rank squads and the provisional squads simultaneously. Supplemental information will appear on your screens throughout, so please refer to them during this overview. Once the overview has concluded, all squads will receive a rundown of the rules in text form. So please devote your full attention to listening, as note-taking would be redundant. And of course, if we remember during the loudspeaker announcement by Osama earlier this morning, of course on day 7, we saw that Osama was taking notes, and I really want to believe that this is just like directly targeting Osama, being like, okay, we saw Osama was taking notes, remind him he doesn't need to. I think that'd be a little bit of a funny thing, right? But we see that Osama has his notepad in his hand, just like starts to put down his pencil and the notepad on his desk, like, okay, if you're going to target me like that, right? But either way, as all of this happens, Shinoda starts off his big thing saying, alright, firstly, Phase 2 is the long-term combat phase, which will pit A-rank squads against all of the agents on the provisional squads. And I do mean all. Operators will also be included. What this means is that even the operators will be transported to the test area's combat map. As we see that both Katori and Uri are like, oh wow, like a new twist right off the bat, right? But Shinoda just continues saying like, hey, at 8:45 tomorrow morning, you'll receive a special trigger set for Phase 2, and activating these triggers will transport you to the test map. The test will begin at 9 a.m. sharp. And in order to win, one team must reach 5,000 points. The side that reaches 5,000 points first will be declared the victor. In the event that neither team reaches 5,000 points, the winner will be the side that has achieved more points once 36 hours have elapsed. And of course, Oki just says like, okay, so what they're saying is that this phase won't last any longer than 36 hours. And Katori even says like, hey, but what he's also saying is that this test could end way sooner than even that right there, right? Shinoda continues saying, but points can be earned by one of two methods, and the first method is by defeating members of the opposing team, and that each agent on either side has a defined defeat value. And of course, the defeat value is just equal to the points received by the opposing team upon an agent's given defeat, right? As he just explains that, hey, for the A-rank agents, the values are as follows. Captains are worth 200 points, operators are worth 120 points, and standard A-rank agents are worth 100 points. And he pretty much just gives an example saying like, hey, if a provisional squad member defeats an A-rank captain, it's 200 points. If they defeat an operator, it's 120. It's really just like that, giving that redundant example just to make sure it gets like put in somebody's head. These are the rules. And of course, this may beg the question, what are the values for all the provisional squads? Of course, there are only 40 A-rank agents, but 55 provisional squad agents. As we see that Shinoda just says like, hey, but on the other hand, the defeat value of a given provisional squad agent is exactly the number of points they ultimately received through the A-rank evaluations. And we get a close-up on Osama's face as Shinoda says this. And of course, it gets explained like, hey, for instance, an agent who receives 80 points from A-rank evaluations during Phase 1 will, upon defeat in Phase 2, will reward the A-rank team 80 points. Now, one of the big things I first learned whenever I read this chapter about a month ago was the whole idea of, are all of these captain evaluation points included? And from what I can tell, they're probably not, being that they aren't A-rank points, because then that would make people like Osamu, who originally have, if we go back to the chart in chapter number 252, where we saw all of like the, around what had been given out so far on all of the A-rankers points benefits, right? We see that Mikuma had 121 points, which is about equivalent to what you get for defeating an operator. And if we added 450 points to that, he is just like worth 500 points off the bat, which is really close to being just like a tenth of the points that the A-rank squad would need to win to get to that 500 point maximum. And if we look at some of the other characters, like Kuruma has 143 points for some reason, and I forget how many points he got during his captain's evaluation. I guess I could go and briefly check real quick. I've actually got that chapter open, so let me go find Kuruma. Yeah, he got 80 points, which would mean, like, yeah, he'd be worth over 200 points, even more than an A-rank captain. And being that there are 55 team members, I just think that the points are going to be very similar to what we saw on the chart on 252, not including all of the captain's evaluation points, because that just doesn't seem like it'd be very fair, right? And of course, if you remember, on that chart, it also stated that every single A-rank judge had 135 points to give out, which is about the average between, like, I guess if you, like, said, okay, 100 points for all of, let me actually do that math. So if we add 200 plus 120 plus 100 plus 100, which is the typical amount of members on the squad, that'd be 520, and if we divide that by 4, that is 130, right? So pretty much that whole same idea of you're getting, the A-rankers were given about the amount of points that their team was worth to give to the regular squad members, right? And of course, you have to remember there's some demerits factored in there, so as long as you give us like 5 points worth of demerits and you give out all of your positive points, it really evens out to about 130 in general, which, yeah, it really makes a whole lot of sense that that's the way this exam was set up, and Ashihara, for thinking about all of that, I have to commend you, right? But either way, we just get the whole idea of, like, hey, defeat somebody with 80 points, the A-rank team gets 80 points, right? And also the whole idea of, like, hey, it should go without saying that the A-rank squads are aware of all of these evaluation rules, being that they gave them out, so both sides would do well to remember this during battle. Then the second method of earning points is to destroy the opposing team's terminals. And I love how Couture's like, okay, like, do you care to explain to us what a terminal is? But either way, we understand that the test map will feature a number of special structures called terminals, with 10 for the A-rank team and 11 for the provisional squad team. And we just get a look at these terminals. They are something that is about the height of the average human, and they're like these, a little bit of like a square, like box, like terminal thing, right? And they just have the border logo stationed on them, right? They pretty much just like look like a rectangle standing up tall, right? It's what a terminal is, right? But also, this is a little interesting for the whole idea of there are 11, 11, oh geez, I can't remember it. 11 provisional squad teams, which is like, okay, that makes sense for 11 terminals, but if we remember, there are only 9 A-rank squads, so why do we have 10 terminals? I'm sure that, I mean, as we're about to understand, each terminal is guarded by a very powerful shield, and if destroyed, the terminal is worth 500 points. So yes, that is a big ticket item, so I guess they want to have 5 or 10 of those on the opposing team battlefield, so if one team was to destroy all 10 terminals without killing a single combatant, they would automatically win the competition, right? And of course, we get this whole idea of like, wow, like 500 points, that's crazy, right? And Oki even says like, I mean, yeah, like, look at that, there were 5 standard A-rankers then, right? As I love this next part, as Shino just says like, hey, and the shields protecting the terminals are sturdy enough to withstand, for example, approximately 8 Ibis shots from Agent Amatori before being destroyed. Like, we know the Ibis is the most powerful sniper trigger, and we know how Chica's Trion works, and just the idea that it takes 8 Ibis shots, like, these things have, that shield has to be insanely crazy. Like, that can't be like the standard shield that most of the agents in the series use. Like, that's just insane, but it is a pretty fun thing to be like, yeah, 8 Ibis shots from Amatori. That's pretty strong, right? And I love how Gamer Couture is like, man, like, that's way too tanky, right? But Suwa just says like, hey, it seems like realistically only melee attackers are the only ones who stand a chance of busting through all of those shields, right? Well, Shinoda continues saying like, hey, all of that concludes the explanation of how to claim victory, but moving on, I'll go over the special rules in detail. First, the inability to recover Trion. For duration of this phase, an agent's Trion body cannot be deactivated unless defeated by the enemy, and consequently, an agent cannot manually bail out from the map. Because your flesh and blood bodies cannot rest when present on the test map, recovering Trion on the map is impossible. This should significantly influence your tactics. And Oki even points out like, okay, so like, the folks who use like bullet triggers will be at a massive disadvantage during this test. And Osamu says, like, hey, and that also makes triggers like Carmeleon and Bagworm less viable. Of course, the ability to be completely invisible and hide yourself from radar with the Bagworm, being that we know that even though Bagworm is just like a standard like piece of clothing, it does take a Trion, it does like drain Trion as you use it, right? But with this whole idea, she notices, like, hey, and that means the next rule concerns respawning. Defeated units will bail out from the test map and either enter their A-rank squad room or the sealed environment facility. And, like, hey, afterward, assuming that Trion is fully restored through proper rest and nutrient intake, the defeated agent may once again utilize the Phase 2 trigger to respawn into the test map. But naturally, this can only occur if the test hasn't yet ended. As we get this whole idea of both Ninomiya and Tachikawa being knocked out of the environment phase, pretty much. And hey, would you take a look at this? They both fall into their beds, they both eat and sleep to get all of their Trion back, and then they get ready to respawn into the second part of the exam. But as this happens, there's a janitor who walks into Tachikawa's squad room and just is like, oh, it ended like 6 hours ago, sorry pal. And yeah, that means Tachikawa was not present for the last part of the battle, right? But either way, once the test is over, respawning is no longer an option, right? And here in a moment, Suwa just is like, alright, well that makes sense, so there's a chance the test could end while you're simply snoozing away. And Kotori's like, yeah, that would be a big bummer, right? But either way, we then see that she notices, like, hey, an agent can select any of their team's remaining terminals as their respawn point. So, sort of, if you need to respawn, you can get into any of the areas of your terminals that have not been deleted yet. So, it makes a lot of sense there, sort of like, your terminals are like your fast travel points, I guess, in the best video game term I can give them, right? But either way, take caution for defeated agents who respawn. Once again, award points to the opposing team if they are defeated a second time. So hey, if they get knocked out and it's a captain like Tachikawa, that's 200 points for one team. If they respawn and get knocked out again, that's another 200 points for the provisional squad team, right? As we just get here, Kotori's saying, like, hey, be careful, Four Eyes, like, they might try to rack up points on you by taking you out every time you respawn over and over. And I think it was this line from Kotori that really made me think, like, hey, are the captain's evaluations part of this whole idea? For the whole fact of, like, if we just read into this here, Kotori's like, hey, you have a lot of points on your head, which is why, like, yeah, what Osamu's, like, in that case, like, nearly 600 points be, like, a big deal for them to get, but I honestly just really don't know, because on, like, one hand, Osamu doesn't have any more points than, like, Suwa does, for instance. I mean, Suwa has, like, almost 30 more points than Mikumo does, so, like, I just really don't get what Ashar is going for here. I think we need a little bit more explanation, right? But either way, the next section that she noticed talking about is operators in combat. Operators will utilize portable field laptops to provide the same support of combat to support during rank wars and defense missions. During the test, the operator's Trion bodies will effectively ignore all damage from offensive triggers. However, the destruction of an operator's field laptop will destroy the operator himself, forcing them to then bail out. And we pretty much get the whole idea of, like, okay, the body for an operator is their laptop. This is something that Ui has something to say about, right? And Oki sort of brings up the whole idea of, like, maybe the test management did this for the whole reason of it'd be a good way to not have an issue with people who have issues at shooting girls, like Tsujime. So, hey, why would you want to have that be a problem and just shoot them here in the moment, right? Their laptops are their bodies. It's not a physical person, it's a computer, right? And Osamu's like, yeah, that'd make a little bit of sense if that's how they were doing it, right? But either way, Shino just says, like, hey, verbal communication between squads will only be possible via the operator's field laptops. Operators are also essential for talking within a given squad, right? So you can pretty much get the whole idea of, like, hey, all of the operators are connected together, but for instance, if we have Rokuda who is trying to talk with one of the operators on, or just one of the operators from Wakamura Squad, Hasoi has to be the one to get all of that other information from her and then relay it to her team of Wakamura Squad 11. Same thing that Rokuda has to do for, Kodera Squad 6, right? And of course, this is how the A-rankers all work too. And the only other way to communicate will be using the texting function on your personal mobile devices. Of course, the cell phones all these characters have had in the room here, they can use those. They can't make calls, but they can text with each other, right? And as all this happens, the whole idea is like, hey, the defeat of a squad's operator will make a cooperation across large distances quite difficult if needed, right? So, hey, the operators are very important. Protect them with your life, right? But of course, there's one more wrinkle to this whole rule of the operators, and that's the idea that the field laptop's batteries will drain after about half an hour. So you have 30 minutes to use them, but if you are in the area of a terminal, specifically within a 30-meter radius, they'll recharge at a predetermined rate. And while engaging in battle tactics, you do well to remember about your remaining battery charge, right? And Suwa pretty much is like, hey, it sounds like we'll be treating these terminals as almost a home base of sorts, right? And honestly, it's going to be a very interesting thing, because I could very easily see being they don't give like a rate of charge for the laptops. Like, oh, hey, you can use your laptop while it's in the vicinity of a terminal, and it'll charge at a certain rate, but it won't charge as, like, it may take an hour to get to a full charge, but it only takes 30 minutes to drain that battery. So it's like, it may be one of these interesting things where, hey, you use your computer for 1 minute, and you drain what is that, like 5%, no, 2% of your battery, but it takes 2 minutes to get 1% of your battery back, say if like it takes an hour to fully charge. So a very interesting thing that I could easily see being a wrinkle even more thrown in here to the general idea of the away mission part 2 of the exam, right? And at this point, Shinoda throws everybody for a loop and just says like, oh, the next rule has to do to Trion soldier usage. And everybody's like, what, like the Trion soldiers? As Shinoda explains that all of the A-rank agents will be allowed to use pre-existing Trion soldiers on the field, and their budget will be 12,000 per squad. And of course, these are all of the Trion soldiers that we know and love. We've got the Bombers, the Ilgars, Bamsters, Rabbits, Hounds, Marmods, what else am I forgetting here in the moment, right? But pretty much they can use all of these units, and we see that they all have a determined point value given here, and the most expensive one is an Ilgar at just shy of 3,000 points, right? With the whole idea of, hey, like normal, it's the same thing that you guys had to do in the battle simulations, but it's just like a max budget of 12,000 for them, right? As the whole idea is like, Couture's like, hey, so this is like why they had us playing around with all of those Trion soldiers during the special sims, and Ui's like, yes, it definitely seems so, right? But then the bigger twist to this rule comes in the fact that for the provisional squads, your Trion soldier allies will be the ones engineered in the creation tool. In this case, however, you will no longer be constrained to a maximum unit cost based on the creator's Trion stat, which is a really big deal, which means like people like Osamu can cook up some very big units without a massive constraint, right? As Osamu's like, okay, well, if we've got free reign to create Trion soldiers now, it seems like that's one clear way they're giving our provisional squad an advantage over the A-rankers, right? But Shinoda has one more thing to say, saying that a provisional squad's total budget will be equal to their final score from Phase 1 of the exam. This means that Mizukami Squad 1 will have 13,418 points to work with, while OG Squad 2 will only have 10,676 points. And of course, for Suwa Squad, this means that they just have like 537 number of points to work with, but that is still a very big deal, right? And we see like pretty much everybody below Suwa Squad, so Murakami Squad 10, who is in 4th place, all the way down to OG Squad 2, all of them have less points to actually work with here in a moment, which is a way that even though they're getting able to pretty much create their own Trion soldiers and engineer them, they have less of a budget to actually work with at the end of the day, which is a very interesting idea, right? But either way, on the next page, we see that Director Shinoda explains this whole idea. Mizukami Squad 9 earned this many points in Phase 1, so that is their Trion soldier budget, right? And we even get to the idea of like, hey, please refer to the written overview for further details, but in the meantime, please note that no points are earned off of defeating Trion soldiers. So it makes a whole lot of sense because we know, like, for instance, Husei's Canadian bomber was worth like 2,000 points, and that would be like over a third of the total points it would cost to win this 500 point battle. So it makes sense that these are allies, but it still means like, hey, it'd be really cool if like Taichi or somebody made like a full suit of like Trion body armor. So like you have to beat that before you can get to the Pearson on the inside. It seems like something that Ashihara is going to have a field day writing about, right? But with all of that, it just says like, hey, the provisional squads are asked to upload Trion soldier data before the phase 2 of the exam begins. And remember, just on the topic of food, please refer to the information previously shared with you all. And then, regarding the revision of trigger loadouts, each agent's default trigger loadout for phase 2 of the exam will be drawn from what was utilized during the most recent rank war matches. From now until midnight, though, you can alter your trigger chip configurations by submitting a revision via your laptops, right? So if you're like, oh wow, I was using Bagworm a lot and I now know I won't be able to recover Trion, I can switch out Bagworm if I need to, right? Also saying the operators may also alter their triggers, so please remember to submit revision requests, being that like, yeah, operators typically aren't on the battlefield, so they've got to pick their triggers because they're sure going to be on it, right? It'd be really fun if we got introduced to like the battery pack trigger, specifically meant for like, hey, charging a computer on the field. Like, I don't know, maybe that's like a trigger that like trappers or something use, like Furoshima. Like, we don't know, we know really nothing about the trapper class in World Trigger, but either way, it was like, yeah, I should probably do that now because I don't want to forget for it later, right? And then comes the biggest news out of all of the information we've gotten so far in this chapter. As General Director Shinomiya just says, and the last point concerns replacement agents. And Suwa's like, what replacement agents? As we get the whole idea that currently Kazuma, Arashiyama, and Mio Squad are all short on agents, as some of their own members are currently members of provisional squads. Of course, Kodera, Kitora, oh gosh, what is his name? Kikuchihara and Utagawa. They are all taking part in this exam, which means that replacement agents will be filling these holes for the combat phase. And Osama's like, oh, like, wait a second, like, of course. Like, currently, Kazuma is the only combatant in his squad because Utagawa and Kikuchihara are taking this test, right? As we then get this direct idea of Director Shinomiya saying like, hey, replacing Utagawa and Kikuchihara on Kazuma's squad will be Chief Engineer Raizo Terashima and Chief Engineer Michael Croden. And let me tell you, when I first read this, I went nuts. We're going to be seeing both Raizo and Michael Croden fight in the battle, and of course they're on Kazuma squad, so it makes sense that's where both of these engineers are being placed, but like, hey, we know Michael Croden is from the neighborhood, or I'm sorry, Canada, that's where he's actually from. But it's a really fun thing to like, man, these two characters are going to be part of this, right? And we just see everybody's freaking out like, oh my gosh, right? But of course, we have 2 more agents to replace. As Shino just says, hey, replacing Gatora of Arashiyama squad will be replaced by Assistant Director Kyoko Sawamura. Okay, that's crazy, but even crazier is who is replacing Kodera of Miwa squad. And that is none other than Tacoma Branch Chief Takumi Rindo. And we get a massive panel of all of the members of Tamakoma 2, of course, Osamu and Chika being like, what? And Yuma going like, oh, the boss is fighting? And we end off the chapter pretty much on also looking at Miwa and Yone's faces like, wait a second, like, we've got Takumi Rindo on our team? As we just hear Shinoda's voice say, alright, thus concludes the overview of the rules. May you all perform admirably in battle. As we just cut out to a look of the sky over to Border HQ on this fateful night. And that is where we end World Trigger chapter number 256 and our chapters for July of 2025. I need to quickly check my phone to see how long I've been recording. 45 minutes. I'm not surprised. As I knew, these were going to be 2 really dense chapters to go through, especially chapter number 256 for the main reason of there is just so much we get in this chapter. And of course, where I don't stop talking about it, this whole reveal of, oh my gosh, we have Raizo, Michael Cronin, Assistant Director Kyoko Sawamura, and Takumi Rindo all joining in on this battle is absolutely insane. We have never seen Rindo fight, for one. Honestly, I didn't even know that Kyoko Sawamura was a combatant, but it really makes sense that she is. And of course, the whole idea like, oh yeah, Rizo and Cronin are one also. Like, hey, if you're in Border, you have at least some ability to fight back, right? It's also really cool that all the images we get for these 4 characters look like they all come from the point where there's just like different neighbor invasions going on. And honestly, if I had to guess, it is because the 4 of these guys are all currently out on defense duty, being like, hey, all of the A rankers currently have to be here taking part in this exam to listen to these rules. So do all the like high B rank squads, right? Which also leads into a bigger idea of during the 36 hours this phase is going on, you are going to have no A rankers and no mid to high B rankers actually fighting, which means really the combatants are going to be the Border HQ management who aren't overseeing the test, which is probably going to be most of them. And then you have Jean and Amo, which they're S-rank agents. I'm sure that Jean's going to be getting the Fujin back for this and that he's going to be able to like defer anything that comes during the tests pretty much, right? And of course, Amo's power that we still have no idea about. I mean, we know that Amo's power has to do with him seeing colors of some kind, but like, what does that mean? I don't know. But of course, the other idea is like, okay, like, I guess, does that mean the low B rank squads and the C rank agents are going to be on defense duty? Like, what does that mean? But going back through all of the rules that get brought up in this chapter, there is a lot of them, right? Of course, the whole idea of you win by getting to 500 points. The way these points are done is through the idea of the defeat value, the A-rank points, and then the provisional squad points, which I still don't understand. I really hope Ashihara makes that a bit more clear in future chapters, especially when we get to the whole idea. I don't know if I'm like reading too far into it or really what I'm doing here, right? Of course, the whole idea of 500 points in these terminals are like your home base for this whole idea. You cannot recover Trion, so make sure that you don't use it all up pretty much, and if you do want to respawn, you've got to make sure you don't do it before the battle is over, right? Operators are a part of combat, the whole idea of like communication restrictions and operators going through and, hey, their computer is their body pretty much. Trion soldiers are going to be able to be used and the squad budget and no more creation limits. You can change your triggers, which honestly, I think is one of the more least interesting parts of this test, but it will be cool to see, like, oh, some characters who normally use Carmelians and Bagworms may switch those out for different triggers, or may get a new loadout, because maybe they learned something from the battle sims or something like that, right? And of course, the big deal of the replacement agents, this is really what made this chapter for me, and arguably everybody else is like, wait a second, we're seeing Cronin, Rizo, Sawamura, and Rindo all fight, like, this is crazy and insane, right? Not to mention the whole fact of, like, if we look at all of the squads that these people are being placed on, we know the Miwa squad is always allied with, or has always allied more with, oh gosh, what is his name right there? Chief Director Kido, right? Or Commander Kido, I guess is what they actually call him in the series. Let me get my terminology correct. And being that they are more on that side of, like, we all hate neighbors, neighbors cannot be our friends, being that we have Rindo, who is like, yeah, we're part of Tamakoma, like, neighbors can be friends, being that he is going to be part of Neo Squad for this exam is just really cool. Gosh, I feel like there's so much more I could go on about on these 2 chapters and about all of the ideas of this A-rank test, but I honestly don't know what else to bring up right now. It's just, we have a lot of dense information. Like I said, I really don't think we're going to be getting a chapter for August. I would be very happy to be surprised about that, but being that there's just so much World Trigger, we've gotten 8 chapters this year so far, and we're in July. We are above pace so far, being that we normally get like 12 a year. So I'd be more than happy for Ashihara to take a month off and then bring us one chapter where it's like, because like I said earlier in the video, I'm guessing that chapter number 257 will really be based on like everything getting ready for the exam, and by the end of that chapter, oh, look at this, the test has officially begun. And I really do feel like that would be a good way to write the next part of the story, but yeah, we're so close to getting actual World Trigger combat for the first time in, what, 5 years almost? Like, or maybe even 6. Like, no, because it was the beginning of 2020, or 2021, I forget, whenever the draft happened. And to be fair, like, I started reading World Trigger during the draft, so it has been, like, so long since we've had really anything combat from this series, and I'm just really happy to get back to it. Really, my voice is starting to get out of me, and I don't know what else I can possibly say about this besides, like, bro, I can't wait to see Sawamura and Rizo fight. Like, yeah, Michael Cronin and Takumi Rindo are, like, something else, but, like, Sawamura and Rizo, like, you made my day telling me that these two are going to be combatants, but, yeah, with all that out of the way, just thank you guys so very much for watching this video on World Trigger chapter numbers 255 and 256. If you did enjoy it, I have covered a lot of other World Trigger a whole lot of other World Trigger chapters on this YouTube channel. There will be a post link down in the description box down below and also on the end card of this video. And, yeah, I can't wait for more World Trigger in the future, and until then, I will be talking about those chapters whenever they come out, whether it be August, September, or even October if we have to wait a little bit longer. But with all of that out of the way, I'll see you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma 231, talking about World Trigger, signing out.